It was the best gift I had ever gotten. Bad Rats. My friend had given it to me, but he made it sound like a bad thing. I don't know why. Best game I ever played. After I beat it, I decided to gift it to another one of my friends. He really didn't seem to be too happy about it, though. Why? He took it like a cruel joke. His loss, I guess. I mention this because it was the last game I ever got. The next one I got would be the end of it all. I got a Steam message one day from a user named "Lol, my game will kill you, lol." Seemed like a trustworthy name, but I had no idea who it was. I was confused, but I struck up a conversation with him. My Steam name is XXX Virgil Big Dick Mofo 666XXX. Just so you know who's talking. Here is the conversation.
He beckons to you now.
Who are you? Who is he? And why does he beckon to me?
All your questions have one answer.
And what would that be?
Fulfill his revenge.
Who is he? Just fucking tell me, you noob.
PapersPlease.exe.
What the fuck is that? I never got a response. The conversation had only lasted for 58.932443 seconds. I had to know what this PapersPlease.exe was. But then, right before my eyes, my screen went black. It stayed that way for 18.392 seconds, and then a title screen popped up. The title screen looked to be that of Papers, Please. I had heard of this game, and I thought that it could never live up to the greatness of Bad Rats. That is why I had never played it. But I guess I just got the game for free. I found that kinda cool. But then more text popped up under it. It said, Jorji's Revenge. The title screen was also dripping hyper-realistic blood across a flapping flag next to a tree. The tree was hyper-realistic as well, and the flag's hyper-realistic animation, which lasted for 12.9347 seconds. The music was Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, but in reverse. I thought that was a little off, but I shrugged it off as a glitch. I continued on to the main game, where my character was in the booth as usual. The game went on as usual for a while, and I rather enjoyed it. I was being a cruel bastard on purpose for this run, detaining people for the fun of it, sending them to the gulags. Everything was going swell, till he showed up. A man by the name of Jorji Gustava. Was this the titular character, or was this a coincidence? When he came to the counter, he had nothing of which he needed to pass. Another person that deserved to be detained. So I hit the button, and off he went. I did notice that after I hit the button, the screen flashed for a split second. I had little time to read it, but I was able to do so. It said, 666. I was freaking out now. I started to fear for my life at this point. After he was carried off, a cutscene triggered. It was hyper-realistic. In fact, it was a hyper-realistic depiction of Jorji being nailed to a tree, as if he was being crucified. He screamed in pain as they drove the nails into his hands. The music during the scene was so horrifying. The music was It Has to Be This Way, from Metal Gear Rising, only in reverse. Watched every moment as Jorji toiled in pain, with every nail that went through his limbs. Once done, they left him there, and I watched as he suffered for nearly 4 hours, 56 minutes, 20 and 26.4574 seconds. I watched as hyper-realistic mosquitoes picked him apart, and heard every single cry for help. It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. And I was the one who had done it. Soon, Jorji fell dead. As he lay there, his eyes stared right into mine as the screen faded to black. I also watched as the numbers 666 were branded across his forehead by nothing. The screen stayed this way for 5.345 seconds, and then it went back to the title screen. Something was off about it this time. The Jorji's revenge part was not only there to begin with, but it seemed brighter this time. It was also oozing hyper-realistic blood. I was so scared now that I let out a scream. That blood looked even better than hyper-realistic. It was something more like killer realistic. That's how real it was. It was more real than real. It was more real than hyper-real. It looked like your finger would be stained if you touched it. The flag now had a 666 burned into it, and the tree was now covered in the killer realistic blood from the title. I pressed start despite how scared I was, as well as my guilt over Jorji's murder. When I pressed start, I heard that Lavos screech from Chrono Trigger play. At this point, I realized that this was either a hacked game or a haunted game. The game faded back into the game from where I left off, and it went like that for a while. The only difference was that there was creepy music playing. It was Butter Building from Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland, but it was in reverse and killer realistic. The game played normal for a while, but after 638.53495 seconds, a strange person walked up. When revealed, he resembled someone I had seen before, but I couldn't remember who he was. He said that he was installing a scanner to see naked people. This freaked me out. I ran out of my house screaming in fear and running through the streets. I almost got hit by a car. The car turned out to be driven by my best friend, Tony. Let's just call him that. He asked me what was wrong. I told him that I was playing a really creepy game that was driving me to the brink of insanity. He understood, and he told me he would help me beat it. We went back inside, and on my computer screen was a hyper-realistic image that almost made me shit my pants. It was a picture of the Scanner Man, but his eyes glowed in a demonic way. I began to think that the game was trying to scare me, but I was too scared to think that. My friend screamed out in horror, "It's Vulcan!" And then we heard that Lavos screech again. In a split second, I watched as Vulcan pulled my friend through the computer screen. I couldn't believe my eyes. I then watched as Vulcan shocked my friend to a crisp. But he was still alive. They carried him off to the gulags, and I watched in horror as the scene with Jorji played out, only with my friend in his place. I felt so bad, but I couldn't pull myself from the screen. Then Vulcan walked up to my friend, looked at me with his terrifying eyes, and ripped my friend's heart out. After that, he took out a big bite and laughed, which sounded a lot like that Kefka laugh, but killer realistic. I noticed then that Vulcan too had a 666 emblazoned on his uniform. The scene faded to black as I watched him smile at me with the most sinister look ever. I couldn't help it. I let the brownies loose. After that, the screen stayed black for 12.44223 seconds. Then, in a split second, a still frame of my friend the moment he died came up, moving back and forth. His scream also blared out of the scene, and I felt myself losing my hearing. It lasted for 10.3423 seconds, till it abruptly cut back to the scanner. Vulcan now looked normal, or as normal as he ever did. After he was done talking, the game continued as usual. I couldn't help but play. It went normal until the fourth person who needed to be scanned. It went as expected, but then I heard that horrible sound of my friend as the screen shook violently. When it opened, I saw the red-eyed Vulcan again, and his teeth were dripping killer realistic blood. Under him was the body of his victim, with their heart ripped out. I again went into a fit of fear and flailed around my house for 55.3723 seconds, till I slipped on a banana peel and knocked myself out. I had the worst nightmare ever. I felt as I was nailed to a tree by Jorji and Vulcan, both sporting glowing red eyes that seeped killer realistic blood like a faucet. They both smiled their evil smiles, and I heard as they let out Lavos screeches. They left me there, and came back with chairs. They watched as I struggled against the oak, and as the blood ran to the ground. Volgan then walked up to me and spoke, but it was backwards, so I'm not quite sure what he said. After that, he plunged his hand into my chest and pulled my heart out. I watched as he took a bite of it, and then I popped awake. I knew I had to finish this game, or I would be haunted by it till my grave. So I went back to the game, and found it back how it was. A few more people were checked and killed by Volgan, but I just had to beat the game. I was so scared. I felt my brain literally start to melt, but I just had to beat it. The next person to walk into the booth was the last one. It was Jorji. But it wasn't regular Jorji. It was a mangled, twisted version of the Jorji I knew and loved. His eyes were sunken and leaking killer-realistic blood. His forehead was branded with 666, and his claws gleamed in the moonlight. He recounted how I was the one who put him through the pain he had received, and that his revenge was almost complete. After he had told his story, Volgan walked into the scene. Those 4 glowing red eyes peered right into my soul, and I felt my hair fall out of my skull from sheer terror. I sat back down and listened to them. They said that for my horrible deed, I would pay. Once the scene returned, it was the most horrifying abomination I had ever seen. It was a fusion of Jorji and Volgan. I decided to call it Joljin. It was so scary that it lit my eyes on fire. I felt them as they melted out of the sockets and dripped onto the floor. I started seizing up from the amount of horror, and I felt as blood started dripping from my hand that was holding the mouse too hard. After that, I heard a strange noise, followed by a mixture of noises. Joljin then started laughing the Kefka laugh, and then he screeched that Lavos screech. My arm fell off from fear. Then they said the last phrase I would ever hear. Boo! But it was reversed, and it was... I don't even know. It was more realistic than killer realistic. It was ultra realistic. That was it. I was now so scared that my body literally exploded into thousands of pieces, and then Joljin walked out of the computer. He was ready to conquer Earth.